I'm going to tell you the story about what happened to four of us at a place called Smith Mountain Lake. And this is a true story, and it's something that if you have questions, I'd love to entertain them. So I'm not going to take up all my time talking. If you can imagine, Smith Mountain Lake is about 40 miles from Roanoke, Virginia. The reason it was created was because a dam was built, a hydroelectric dam, and once the dam was built, all of the water that started filling up the basin started making the lake. It turned out that my cousin, who was an avid fisherman on the lake, had access to a cottage that his parents owned. His father was a medical doctor back in my hometown, and his father and mother had a cottage that they had built as a getaway cottage, especially for the summer months. So my cousin, who happened to work for me at the time, would often say, "Let's go fishing," which meant we would go to the cottage where his parents kept a boat, and we go fishing. And of course, it didn't really matter because at the time there were no fish in the Smith Mountain Lake. they were minnows, and anyway, we went there. As a matter of fact, four of us went there. And I'm going to abbreviate the story pretty much because if you read the book, you'll want to see the details. You'll get to know the people, and you'll get to feel like you're inside the story. So here we are, Smith Mountain Lake. We did our fishing thing, didn't catch a thing, had to park the boat, go up to the cottage. And if you can imagine the cottage, here's the lake, and the cottage was up at the top of a hill overlooking the lake, so that it was a wonderful height because you could look out across the lake and you'd see the lights of Roanoke 40 miles away. That night was so dark and clear. It was in October 1978. And we ended up deciding to have nachos and whatever you put with nachos, except I wasn't that hungry. The reason that mattered is this was a small cottage, and if you can imagine, the night was so clear for some reason. I promise I do not know the reason. To this day, I don't know the reason. I went out on the little balcony so that the dining room was so close to me, all I had to do was reach behind me and open the sliding glass door, and that's where the dining room was. That's where they were sitting, the other three men. So I was out on the balcony, and like I say, the night was so clear I could see the stars just as clear as I could see the lights of Roanoke. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at the sky, and here are the lights of Roanoke over here, and there are the stars up here. And then between the two, in the distance, there was a red dot in the sky. I had never seen a red dot in the sky. I doubt that any of you have. As a matter of fact, it fascinated me because how could I explain away a red dot in the sky? Well, as curious as I am about things that I can't explain, I stared at that red dot for must have been 5 or 6 minutes, wondering if it was stationary. After all, if it was stationary, I'd have to figure out who put it there, or how it got there, or where it had come from. What I decided was that I needed to watch it until I could determine whether it was moving or not. And when I hear people describing where saucers come from, I wish they could have seen what I saw. There's no telling how far out that dot was. When I hear you say that the size of a moon is a quarter for us, relative to the size that it would be. Excuse me, this dot was so small that I have no idea how to relate that to the distance it was because of the next thing that happened. As soon as I perceived the slightest bit of motion, the slightest bit, I wish I could do that. I just can't. If you could do that real quickly, that's too slow. The reason I say that, the moment that I perceived motion, the craft appeared. In other words, it had traveled so quickly from that dot, way the heck off in the distance, to where it stopped, literally, without a sound. It was only about 250 feet away from me. It was only about 75 feet up in the air. As you can imagine, I didn't know what to think. I have to admit, despite the Boy Scout that I am, it was scary. And I saw this craft, and if you've got the book, when I tried to get a picture of it, this was the closest I could come. It looked like a dish underneath, and on top was an inverted cup shape. Around the top of the cup, there were alternating windows, glaring with light, white light, white light, red light. It was phenomenal. And once I caught my breath, I reached behind me and I opened up the door and I said to the other guys, you've got to come out here and see this. And they did. And the craft just sat there without any sign of propulsion for about 6 minutes. We all stared at it. It was remarkable in the sense that it didn't make any sound when it came, and it didn't seem to need anything to keep it up. I couldn't believe it. We watched it. The other 3 guys went back into their nachos, and I just stayed there and watched it leave. When it left, it went at an absurd angle like this, very abrupt, and then came back like that, and by the time it went like that, it disappeared as quickly as it had come, without a sound. I took a deep breath and I said to my cousin, does your dad have any binoculars? I knew his dad liked Leica photography, as did I, and that if he had any binoculars, they'd be the best you could buy. 30 seconds later, my cousin comes to the sliding glass door, hands me these binoculars. They're Zeiss binoculars, made in Germany. They're incredible binoculars. So I'm standing there with my binoculars, and they're back in the back, and they're not saying anything. They're at the table. And I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be nice if the saucer came back, knowing that the chances were pretty slim? What happened was that the saucer came back to the very same place, the very same place, in the very same way, without a sound. This time, I wasn't afraid. It was like, okay, I know what to do this time. And I had the binoculars, and it was so close, like I say, about 250 feet, that with the binoculars, I was able to fill the lens with one of these windows. And I thought, okay, I can see inside that window if I just aim my binoculars correctly. Problem was, what I saw was this glaring energy that was so dense I could not see inside of it. Solid, almost solid white light, or solid red light, depending on which window I looked at. course, I slid open the door and I got the guys back out. And each of us took turns looking at it. And it did not move for about 5 or 6 minutes. The rest of the story is kind of interesting because when I tried to get in touch with the armed services the next day, nobody knew anything about a spaceship. And that was troublesome. It ended up that the 4 of us had different reactions to this event. It literally changed our lives. I'll never forget, too, talking to my brother, my own brother. I needed to tell somebody about what had happened. And I called him and I said, I got to tell you this story. My brother listened, and then he finally said, that's a great story, but I don't believe you saw a flying saucer. I got him. I was heartbroken. I said, why would I make up you're my brother, why would I make up a story? Like, why would I call you with a story like this? I've never lied to you. Why would I start now? Didn't change his mind.